We are live. Welcome, everyone, present and future, who is watching this Google Hangout. This is a Hangout that we have entitled, Why Take a Bike Tour? And there are 3 of us presenting and chatting today, and we're very excited to be here. This is the first time for many of us on a Google Hangout, so I was going to first talk a little bit about how the Hangouts work. And what we've learned. We have a few assistants in the background as well who are going to help us manage some of the technical side of it. And because what we're hoping to do is to have a conversation amongst the 3 people who are hosting, and also to involve anyone who might be watching, who might be starting to watch here in a little bit with questions and answers. Well, hopefully if you have questions, you can type them if you're on the Google Hangout page. There's a little Q&A button, and you can submit a question if you click on it. And I'll explain that again. And another note about Google Hangouts, once they have been recorded live, they actually go and live for posterity's sake in YouTube on our Google Plus page. So we'll send out the link to anybody who has joined us in this Google Hangout. We'll send it out and make sure that we disperse it to whomever might find this topic interesting. So the idea is that today we chat and we get some input from folks, but then we'll also be sending it out as a resource in the future. As I said, we have a Q&A option on this as well, which is the great interactive piece about this. We hope that as you listen and as you join us, that you can come in and ask any questions. We'll probably do a chat between those of us who are presenting for only about 30 minutes, and then after that start answering the questions. So you'll see a list of the questions that have been posted on your right-hand toolbar there under the Q&A button. So without further ado, I believe it is 11 o'clock. So if you've joined us and clicked on the play button on this Hangout, you might be listening to us right now live. I want to introduce myself really quickly. My name is Maria Elena Price. I'm with ExperiencePlus Bicycle Tours. We have 2 bases. We are based in Colorado, lovely Colorado. It is nice and warm here on this sunny June day. And we also have a base in Italy. We do road biking tours, guided and supported road biking trips in Europe and South America. I'm also going to have Jim and Ewan, who are joining me on this Hangout, introduce themselves right now really briefly before we go into the actual content. So if I can ask Ewan to introduce himself next, I think then we can start chit-chatting. So if he can hear me, Ewan is in Scotland, so it seems like the distance might be causing some delay.
Hello, Maria Elena. I did hear you there eventually. It's a delay over the pond. So my name is Ewan Wilson. I'm the manager and owner of H9 Adventures. We're an adventure travel company based in Scotland, as you mentioned. We specialise in guided mountain biking holidays. Of mountain biker from the beginner level up to the advanced mountain biker enthusiast. And a key point I want to get out through this conversation is that traveling with your mountain bike is one of the best ways to experience the world. It's not about your limits or of human endurance, as some people think it is. It's about making connections to the landscape, communities, challenging yourself enough, but having a great minded adventurers at the same time. And yeah, I'm looking forward to this over the next 30 minutes.
Thanks, Ewan. And Jim, would you like to introduce yourself?
I would. Thanks, Maria Elena. I'm Jim Sayre. I'm the Executive Director of Adventure Cycling Association. We're headquartered just north of Maria Elena, and we're in Missoula, Montana. It's our world headquarters. We're a national nonprofit. We're the largest cycling membership group in North America with now about 47,300 members, but we have members in about 50 countries. We publish a magazine on bike travel. We run tours. We also sell maps and create routes and maps, bike-friendly routes all over North America. And then we take the net proceeds, the income proceeds from what we do, and then we put that back into advocacy efforts to make North America a more bike-friendly place, create better bike travel conditions. So we just do a lot of things, but it's all to inspire and empower people to travel by bicycle.
Thanks, Jim. So what we've done today is tried to gather some very diverse participants in the world of bike touring and bike tours, and with the point of getting all these diverse viewpoints together to talk about this, and to really have a discussion and inform and educate anybody who's listening and watching about why take a bike tour, and not just on the why, but also on the who and on the how. And the how is actually the most complicated part, and something that we've decided we wanted to discuss first, because ultimately when you start to ask why, you also have to define your terms. And so what the next thing we wanted to briefly discuss was a little bit about how each of us define bike touring and bicycle tours. So I can start with that very quickly. As I said before, I run road biking trips and guided road biking trips, which means we have people on the ground who we provide the bicycles and we provide the guides and the routes and plan. It's a full service planning trip where we also book the hotels, and we do this in many different destinations. And so therefore, when I think of bike tours, I think of fully supported guided bicycle tours that are probably quite different than maybe some other bike tours that are talked about in other parts of the world. So that's where I'm coming from, and we do trips, like I said, in Europe. But the key pieces I think that are important to note from our side of the world and our perspective of the world is that ours do have guides on the ground most of the time, local guides, and we do provide the equipment, and we do pre-book the hotels and also manage all of the routes that people are riding every day. So that's a little bit where I'm coming from. And then I wanted to ask Ewan and Jim to also define the way they see bike tours in their world. They're a little bit different, so I thought that could be a good intro here. So Ewan, can you start with your specialty?
Yeah, thanks, Maria Elena. As I earlier also, we only specialise in guided mountain biking experiences around the world, and we use local guides in each destination to do this. And I suppose it's the reason we do that. One is safety, and the other is making sure that the customer is getting exactly what they expected from the tour. So through the venture, you've obviously got your support guides and you've got your guide who's leading the trip, and a large part of that, the guide is constantly altering the riding, the fit level, the skill level of the tour to suit the customers. No two mountain bikers are equal. And the safety aspect, I think, is more of an issue when it comes to mountain biking than sort of road or touring, and it's a reason we have completely shied away option on the mountain biking tours. We just feel there's too many potentials for people to get lost, and guides can keep track of all those various aspects through a trip.
Thanks, Ewan. I just wanted to make sure that that was heard, since there might have been a little bit of a freeze. Ewan was commenting that the self-guided aspect of mountain bike touring is a little bit more difficult. And to define and help us understand the self-guided side or other variations of bicycle tours, I think Jim will help us explain a little bit on that.
Okay. Well, as I said, we're a little agnostic on the issue, just because we don't focus on any one specific kind of tour. For me and for the organization, a bike tour is anytime you get on a bike and you travel somewhere overnight. You can do it yourself, you can do it with a guide, you could do what are called self-guided tours, and we can come back to all the definitions too. But we were started as a group almost 40 years ago to promote something called Bike Centennial, which was, we created a route, and then 4,100 people traveled all or part of that route across North America to celebrate the bicentennial of the U.S., the 200th birthday. But since then, we've evolved into promoting every single kind of bike tour you could know. We even promote bike overnights. If you went online and went to bikeovernights.org, it has loads of stories of people who are doing 1 or 2 night trips, usually on their own, and with the equipment at hand. So you could have the dustiest bike in your garage or in your backyard and take that and ride somewhere from your front door, 10 miles, 20 miles, 30 miles, 40 kilometers. It doesn't really matter. The whole idea is just to get out and have a great travel experience by bike. But then it can go all the way up to where we meet people who start riding, traveling by bike, and they go for years, and they don't stop. But mostly people are going to go for 1 or 2 weeks. Many of them go with guides. I just went on a great guided tour, mountain bike tour in the outback of Australia, in what's called the Flinders Range. It's north of Adelaide in South Australia. And I had a great guide. We went for 4 days, did about 35 miles a day on dirt, and it was fabulous. Our tours, we run a variety. We do what we're called self-contained tours, where you carry your own gear. There's no vehicle support. In most of those cases, it's a group that shares cooking and cleaning duties too. We offer supported tours where they're van supported or fully supported with a caterer, and they cook your meals, they carry your gear. We even have a mechanic along to make sure your bike is okay. Mostly people camp, but everything else is taken care of. And then we do instructional courses too, so you can learn how to travel by bike, or we have a leadership training course where you can learn to lead tours either for adventure cycling or for another company, or if you want to start your own company, so you can learn how to lead tours as well.
Thanks, Jim.
That's my summary.
It's a good summary of a lot of the different things that you do, and I think that's one of the key pieces of what we're trying to communicate and let people know, is that there are so many different types of bicycle tours out there that's one of the reasons we think there needs to be a discussion.
Maria Elena, let me add one other thing.
Yeah, please.
I just want to make sure everybody who's on this realizes, especially if you've never done a bike trip, that what you'll hear shouldn't intimidate you at all, that it is really easy to do this. And whatever your entry point, whatever your skill level on a bicycle, even if you haven't ridden for years, there's an option for you. And we just want to make sure that you have the information you need to get into it, because it is a growing area. There's really a boom in bike travel right now, and a lot more people are getting into it. So there's an option for you.
Yeah, that's exactly, I think that's exactly kind of one of the reasons we felt this was an interesting time to chat about this, was because there's an increase in popularity in bicycle travel and even bicycling from a commuting standpoint all across the board in Europe and definitely in North America as well. And so the different types of bicycle tours that are out there, I think it's important for us to explain them, because oftentimes when you read about a bike tour, whether it's in a journalistic style, or you hear just even a small report about a bike tour, we think that everybody should understand what type of a bike tour it was. And so that's I think one of the key issues about reminding people there are different types. And one of the things that I've noticed is what are the key differences amongst bike tours. And so some of the things that I've always noticed, it has to do with how long you're out, whether you have a guide or not, because also one piece that we briefly mentioned was the way of bicycle travel, which is self-guided, which is very important in many parts of the world. And that's when it's kind of a hybrid between guided and self-supported, where you have somebody who has planned out routes and has planned out bookings and hotels and might even transfer luggage, but you do it at your own pace, as in your own departure, in your own group. And that's something that's extremely popular in Europe. And it's becoming more popular. It's a very unique way of cycling as well. So one of the things, actually, and Jim, you brought this up when you said that it's not something to be afraid of. Well, I would ask each of you, I want to know, since we see this rise in interest in bicycle tours, who's actually taking these trips, and what do you think brought them into bicycle touring? Like, what was what I like to call the gateway drug for them to start to take that extra step to be interested in even just taking an overnight, or maybe considering what considering a longer distance trip, whether it's self-supported or guided. So Jim, why don't you start with that, and then I might have Ewan go and answer that question, and then I'll answer.
Well, everybody is taking these kinds of trips, all kinds of people, and it really correlates strongly to where they are in life. So the people that are doing these epic multi-thousand-kilometer or mile trips are often people that don't have a lot of obligations at home. They're empty nesters, their kids have left, or they may be just out of college. Or we find an amazingly large number of people who may have lost their jobs or had some kind of major catharsis in their life, and they want to find themselves, or they want to experience the world in a different way. So those are the ones that do the long ones. And then you can imagine that somebody who doesn't have a lot of vacation time or may have young children, they'll tend to go towards the bike overnights. I mean, on that bikeovernight.org site, we have lots of stories of families that are doing 1 or 2 night trips, often just 15-kilometer trips. And they're just going to a local campground or a local lodge, and that's the extent of what they can do. And then a lot of people are doing the 1 week trips, and they will seek the professional guidance because it makes it super easy. They just have to show up with their bike, or maybe the bike will be provided for them. And oftentimes, again, those are people that just don't have a lot of time to really plan out a trip for themselves. But I'll give you one example. Here in Missoula, we are not close to any major metropolitan area. We are a town of 65,000. The nearest big metropolitan area is Seattle, and that's about 500 miles away. But we still have had a massive increase in the number of people who are riding through to visit us. And they are all ages, all sizes and shapes. Some of them have never done a bike trip in their life, and then they go off and ride 4,000 miles. Go figure. And they're from all over the world. Many from the U.S., but also many from Asia and Europe will travel through the States. So all kinds of people, really, it's amazing. And as I said, some people have never done this before, and then they'll do the most ambitious thing possible for starters, or they might start with a bike overnight.
Thanks, Jim. Yeah, I think that's the broad, all-encompassing person, and it's true. That's one of the exciting things, and I think what's feeding the increase in bicycling interest is that there are so many diverse people joining in. So, Ewan, who's the one taking mountain bike trips, and what's their gateway drug?
Yeah, I think I'll start with just maybe a sort of an outline of the customer themselves, and where they come from, and move into where they've come from. So our customers, they range in New Zealand. The type of person who's taking multiple trips a year. One of them, adventure experience. Where they've come from, interesting and varied depending on the country they come from. But we're seeing a lot of crossing in from road biking and touring. So people who have maybe got their fitness through road biking, touring, cycling, maybe got that adventure bug from that. People are coming off the road, some of them due to safety, looking to come to mountain where you don't have the car aspect. You've got the trees and the rocks at mountain, which are just as dangerous, but at least they're not moving. And we're also seeing a lot more man-made bike parks are popping up all around the world. Relatively safe environments to hone their skills, but once they've got the skills, they're then looking from the nursery slope as such, and looking to then take their bike and travel experience, and they're realizing you can go to Nepal, Scotland, and have an adventurous time, but also a safe time. You're being looked after, your accommodation's been provided for you, and all you have to concentrate on is riding your bike and enjoying the scenery and taking pictures and enjoying your cyclists.
Thanks, Ewan. I think that's an interesting point where you say when people are once they have their fitness up, then they move on to maybe going off-road and on the mountain biking. And For us, I'd say that we also have a very eclectic mix of customers, and our customers, as I call it, the gateway drug might be just hopping on a bike at home and deciding to start commuting at home. So probably, hopefully taking things from what Jim's organization does and maybe doing some of their own cycling, but probably not doing long overnights, because oftentimes the people we get are the folks who maybe don't know when to start or how to start planning the actual route and the itinerary. And so we get a lot of leisure and recreational cyclists, or people who are very active in their bike clubs. And then on the other hand, we also get folks who just realize that the travel aspect of being able to visit a destination by bike is the appealing part. So they might not even consider themselves cyclists at home, they're just active. But they actually hinge onto the side that on what we provide, which is the travel side, and that is very appealing to them, and so therefore they sometimes maybe only bike when they are on some of our bike tours, which really I think is great because I'm a huge advocate for travel by bicycle. You don't need to necessarily be a bicyclist at home, but oftentimes they might go home and then start biking more than they did before. So it's a real mix. I would say, though, generally it's leisure and travel cyclists who join our guided tours. And then we have different levels. Like many companies, we do have different difficulty levels on our tours. So we have the easier tours that appeal to the folks who might not consider themselves cyclists, and then we do have harder trips for people who are used to doing 30 or 40 miles a day. One of the key things about bicycle tours, I think, and how you might define them or how you might go about picking one and why you might go about picking one is to consider that there is a trip out there for pretty much anybody. You can dissect bicycle trips based on the type of bike that you're going to use, based on the type of support you want. Like we said, we have guided, we have self-support, there's self-guided, there's self-supported. The length, oftentimes we're talking about multi-day trips, and I think we would consider a bike tour anything that's multi-day. And then probably more specifically, and the biggest concern people have is the difficulty of what's the exercise that might be required. But something that some people don't think of, and I think this is where our experience can come in and help, are the other challenges that exist in managing a bicycle tour. And so I wanted to ask each of you to discuss a little bit of the challenges you see that either your organization can help tackle. For example, I think one of the biggest challenges for planning or for when people think about bicycle tours is the equipment. You know, how does one deal with equipment? The physical, you know, how do you deal with the fact that you might not feel physically prepared or it sounds really daunting? And then one thing that many people don't think of is navigation. How do you know which way to turn when you go out your driveway or when you go out your hotel room? And I think that's something that are key questions that people should ask whenever they're thinking about a bike tour. So Ewan, can you weigh in on some of those things, or if you have any other challenges that you see crop up and the questions that you often have to answer? I don't know if Ewan is across the pond, and it seems sometimes he's not hearing my hand off to him, so let me see if he's on here. Maybe Jim, why don't you take over, and then I'll have Ewan chime in when you're done.
Well, again, the type of tour will dictate what kind of services you're going to be offered. In our case, in all of our tours, we're going to provide detailed maps or navigation tools, a combination usually of cue sheets and maps that'll help you figure out where you're going. So that's on any of our tours, but for the self-contained, you're pretty much going to have the cue sheets that'll tell you the turn-by-turn instructions, because most of our tours are on roads too. You don't necessarily have street signs on mountain bike tours, of course, but we definitely provide that service. And then on the larger tours where we have 40 to 80 people on a fully supported tour, we oftentimes will have a staff person go ahead and chalk mark directions too, so you can combine that with your arrangement through the cue sheets and maps. So you'll have both of those available. So that's navigation, and that is a big fear. And then otherwise, it's more the equipment, most of these tours we've talked about, it's pretty much just bring your bike, or in many cases, a bike can be provided for you as long as it fits you right. I think that's really critical. We had somebody just arrive at our office who rode all the way from the Pacific coast, and it was about 600 or 700 miles, and his bike was woefully ill-fitted to him. It was a beautiful new bike, but he hadn't bothered to adjust the seat, the handlebars, so that they fit him really well. So he was extremely uncomfortable, extremely sore. And so working with your local bike shop in advance or working with a tour company is really critical. I can't stress that enough. One thing I will tell you is, especially if you've never done one before, at adventurecycling.org, we have a wealth of how-to information for the newbie, for the rookie, for the beginner who wants to learn how to do this. And it covers everything on selecting a tour to what you might take on your own if you're developing your own tour, to a tour bike buyer's guide, looking at the whole array of options out there for you if you want to buy a bike or rent a bike. So just go ahead and go to adventurecycling.org and look right up for the how-to pages under resources, and it's all free and available. And you can also get sample magazines from us that have a lot of the same information, because there's just tons out there for you to use.
Thanks, Jim. You want to chime in the mountain biking world, what the challenges are that you tackle?
Okay, yeah. And I think that the main problem we face, or misconception challenge that we face in the mountain biking world is ability level. So the beginner to the intermediate to the advanced, you know, what Scotland to Namibia, to, you know, so it's very, very difficult to have this international line on ability level and technical level of mountain biking, and a lot of people, as soon as you mention mountain biking, have this vision of the Red Bull ramp, the extreme rides, the things that are all over YouTube, and immediately people get fighting and put off by that, but that's not mountain biking. There's 100 people in the world that ride like these guys, and the rest of us are enjoying areas of the world that is maybe difficult to get to otherwise, or would take you too long to trek. Or trekking, it might take you 2 weeks to do what we can do in 1 week or 5 days. To get them up on ability level, not on destination, not on fitness. And it's advanced, and they're not an advanced rider. So we've set it up so that Namibia is for beginners, Nepal is for intermediate, Scotland has advanced, so that the customer knows straight away if they're able to do it, first of all, and then to go to that destination. Did you hear all of that?
We did hear the last part. I think you were saying that one of the key things for your trips is to hone in on the ability level first and not necessarily by destination, and that's an important piece of determining, you know, what type of bike trip can be accessible to people. Exactly.
It's
all right. Thank you. So one of the things that
the guide will be able to teach skills as the week goes on, people's riding ability, but we have to be on a level playing field beginning of each tour.
Excellent. Thank you. And obviously, I think in the mountain biking world, navigation isn't as big of a issue because you're often on a trail, and because I think you tend to ride together more than on other bicycle touring types of trips. And I think that's also an interesting key piece of bicycle tours and bicycle touring. I'll talk a little bit about how ExperiencePlus manages some of these challenges. We do provide our own equipment, and that is one of the services that many of the guided companies do, and that we are very proud of the equipment that we provide. So when you show up on our trips, we actually will provide the bicycle for you, and we take all your measurements beforehand. We also do rank our tours by difficulty, and so therefore we chat with people to make sure that they feel comfortable with the level. We have elevation information for all of our rides, and you can sort tours and search for trips based on difficulty and destination, because I do think that that's an important piece to making sure everybody has a good vacation, because ultimately this is usually supposed to be a vacation. And then the navigation piece is key for us as well. Unlike many companies, we do not have cue sheets. Actually, we started back in 1980s marking the route with chalk arrows, and so that's a key piece of an ExperiencePlus tour. We put arrows down in front of everybody's ride. They're not permanent, they're chalk, so they're great. We've found it's an incredible way to enable people to actually feel like they don't have to stop at every corner and look at their cue sheet, and it really helps with the navigation. People can truly take their time and feel like they know where they're going. So that's kind of a cornerstone of how we run our trips, and it's really a cornerstone, I think, in general for the roadside of why bicycle trips are so important. Or why one should take, and maybe not so important, but why one should take a bike tour. And that's ultimately the question we were asked and what we posed as to what we would answer. So I think as we kind of finish up here and then go to questions, one of the things I'd like to ask everybody is why do they see it so important to travel by bike? And I'll start with my answer first, because I get to do that. And I think for me the answer is truly that it is the best way to see a destination, because of the independent nature of the bicycle as a vehicle, because people can do it at their own pace. Given that on our trips, the things that allow people to go at their own pace, I think, have been helped out. Like, we can navigate on your own, and the route is totally laid out for you. And more importantly, though, I think that it's the best way to see a place as long as people are comfortable and feel safe in the trip that they've picked. And I think that's why we wanted to discuss all of the surrounding issues that help define what a bike trip is, because there's so many different iterations, and a lot of the fears that people have in trying to wrap their heads around this concept lie in these particular things about difficulty and equipment and what types of trips are out there. So yeah, in conclusion, I think for me the reason to take a bike tour is purely because it is the best way to actually experience a place, and whatever destination that is, whether it's the eastern plains of Colorado or the beautiful villages of Provence and Tuscany, which there are many, many roads. So Jim, why don't you? I'd like to hear your take on why one should take a bike tour.
Well, I just got interviewed yesterday by National Geographic Travel on this very subject, and so I'm really primed. But I ditto, I echo everything you just said, and I will tell you, I've been in this job for 9 years, but I started doing a bike trip. My first one was in Scotland, actually, from Edinburgh up to the Isle of Skye, Isle of Mull, and then across back to Inverness, and then took the train back to Edinburgh, where I was living at the time. And it's transformative. I can't tell you the thousands of people I've met for whom doing this kind of independent, self-powered travel is so transformative. It really changes their lives, their perspectives. It's a vehicle to self-discovery, of really digging deeper into yourself. And then it is the best way really to see a landscape and explore communities, because it gives you enough speed to cover some real distance, anywhere from 30 to 60, and in some cases 90 or 100 miles if you're really ambitious a day. And it's the friendliest vehicle ever created, because if you're on a bike and you even have a little bit of gear on it, people know you're traveling, and they want to know who you are, what's your story, why are you traveling, where are you going, and more often than not, they will ask how they can help you on your journey. There are so many people who will, especially if you're on your own and you're not with a guided tour, they'll ask you to come over to their house, have a drink, have a meal. I can't tell you the number of people who get to stay at somebody's house because they just want to help that person along. So it's radically different from auto travel, coach carriage travel, airplane, anything. All the bad things you hear and the hassles you hear about that kind of travel, you don't hear as much about bike travel. There are definitely challenges, there's weather, all those things, but it really is a transformative experience for the people that we know who have done bike travel.
Great, thanks, Jim. And it's not fair you were primed for this and haven't had your interview yesterday. That's all right, though. It's good summary. Ewan, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I just have to reiterate everything that you guys are saying, and what I said at the beginning about, you know, traveling with is one of the best experiences you can ever have. You push your own limits, and I think that's maybe to touch on that. It's not about riding the next person is riding or somebody else's idea of an adventure is. Everyone's adventure is different, everyone's ability is different, everyone's fitness is different. So don't put off by what is a cycling tour. Ask, you know, ask us, ask Maria Elena's company, ask Jim, ask people what tour suits you. Give them the information. The tour is out there to fit every type of cyclist. They need to find it and speak to the professionals, and you too will be able to, you know, get out into the world in a way that you didn't know was possible under your own criteria.
So it sounds like the theme is that this independent, the fact that you're doing it on your own power and is really empowering, and I think that's actually an interesting theme that we see in a lot of bike-related enthusiasm, is the fact that you're doing it on your own, under your own power, and on your own time and in your own space. So I think that's very true and accurate. So we had some folks posting questions, and the first question was, there's a tour for everyone and anyone. You say there's a tour for everyone, but what if the typical 30 to 40 miles a day scares some people with little experience? I guess my first comment on that is that I guess that's not necessarily, let's not assume that's typical. I think there's a lot of different levels of trips out there available. Whether it's you doing something on your own, you could only go 10 miles and do a bike overnight and ride 10 miles home, and that would certainly constitute as a bike tour. And then I think on the guided side, there's also a lot of options for typical being more like 20 miles a day. So it's really just that stepping stone. I don't know if anybody else wants to add anything of my co-hosts. So,
this is Jim. I would just again emphasize those how-to pages and bikeovernights.org. And the nice thing about the bike overnight site for those 1 or 2 night trips is a lot of them are short distance, and they're tagged by categories, so family, short, long, deluxe, cheap, and again, you'd just be amazed by the kinds of people that are doing this. So I can't emphasize enough, if you've never done it before and you just want to try something out, it's a great way to get into it.
Thanks. And the other thing I would say is that, I mean, for ExperiencePlus, we actually have training programs that we worked with some training coaches and bike coaches that you can work up to it, and it's a nice motivator to know that you've got your vacation booked, you know, 8 months down the road or 5 months down the road. So we have training programs on, if you go onto our experienceplus.com and just Google bicycle training program, just in our search bar, you'll find it in our blog, and we have them for all types of people who don't usually bike very much or exercise very much, to people who even do, you know, consider themselves exercising 4 or 5 times a week, for anybody training for a harder trip. So I think a lot of companies have those types of things, but if they don't, you can you're more than welcome to jump on our training programs. Joe Friel, a renowned cycling coach and triathlon coach, designed them for our trip specifically, and I think that knowing those resources are out there is really a good way to do it. So another question. Yeah, go ahead.
Just briefly, I was in Australia for the International Velo-Cities Conference. It's a meeting held every year, and this was in Adelaide. But I met with people from Korea, Taiwan, Germany, France, all over the world, about 40 countries. And almost in every country you'll find either local or national clubs and societies devoted to biking and bike tourism. And so oftentimes they will be offering some intro tours as well in your area. So again, some of that is on our website, but if you, for example, live in Germany, there's a wonderful group, ADFC, that has about 140,000 members and offers loads of tours, short and long, throughout Germany and Europe. So that's another resource you can turn to.
Great, thanks, Jim. And then the next question was about what level of experience and fitness are required to take a tour of Italy with ExperiencePlus. And I think that goes back to our standard theme that there's levels for lots of people on all types of trips. And so it really is just about finding the right one. We have all kinds of levels from we rank our trips from 101 to 501. And so I think there's certainly the 101s are for people who are more interested in 20 miles, 30 miles a day, generally flat. There's also train options here and there. So we try and manage our ability so that it's accessible on all levels. And then our 401 tours are looking more like 50, 60 mile days, 10 days of cycling with 3,000 or 4,000 feet of elevation gain. And we've seen people, grow up to that. I had a great interaction with a customer a few years ago who came in, or just last year she came in and she said, I was on tour with you on your 101 tour in Italy 6 years ago, and now I'm ready for a 301, 401 tour. And it's so wonderful to see that people actually do take this habit home and continue it. Do any of us have plans to offer tours in North America as far as actual tours? We don't directly. Ewan, do you have any mountain biking tours?
Yeah, I can take that, and I think it ties in nicely with what we were just talking about with the ability and fitness levels. So we presently have 2 tours in North America, both in Canada, one in Whistler and one in the Yukon, which is up far north next to Alaska, and that the Whistler tour is on the advanced stages. It's the advanced tour. So as you were just mentioning, out of our rating, that would be a 5, and then we also have the Yukon, which would be around about a 3. So for intermediate, it's a lot more flowing, a lot more cultural aspects to the tour. So and within North America, we can cover from your intermediate rider up to the advanced rider. So we're trying to cover geographical bases as well as ability levels as well. And so it's all tying in there, and I think people are maybe beginning to see that as companies we are already thinking, we've already thought about the customer and the problems that customers might have, and the worries that customers might have with ability, fitness levels, and we're already addressing that. So as I said earlier, just speak to us, just ask the questions.
This is Jim, and I would say that that's all we offer are North America tours, so just go to adventurecycling.org/tours. We offer ones that would be more mellow, like we call one a Ragin' Cajun. It's down in Louisiana Bayou country. It's a 1-week tour. It's flat, modest mileage. It's catered and supported, and you end up at a big music and dancing and food festival in the bayou. And then we have much more ambitious tours where you can cross the entire United States. Or we have one leaving this weekend that's called North Star that rides just 15 people all the way from Missoula, Montana in western Montana, all the way to Denali National Park in Alaska. It's 2 months and about 2,800 miles. And a lot of it's on gravel roads. So that is for the hardiest, I have to say. You carry your own gear. So we have that and a lot easier stuff, everything in between. So you can check it out on our website or ask one of our tour specialists.
Great, thanks, Jim. So a couple other questions that came in are what type of cultural interaction can be expected on bike trips in foreign places when the one only speaks English? And that actually is a good question, and that speaks a little bit to the guided aspect about why maybe a guided tour is of interest to folks. On guided tours, the way we are, what we concentrate on is specifically that our guides are there to enable that cultural interaction and to make sure that not only the vehicle you're riding on is helping you experience the destination, but that you're also learning about it and being able to talk to people about it. So we certainly emphasize local interactions. One example that comes to mind is we've actually had, in the last 20 years or 15 years, we've had a program called our Cycling Cap Cambio, which is a hat exchange. We had a customer show up once who gave everybody a hat and said, you're supposed to trade this in with somebody local for something that's of equal or greater value. And it's a great way to have a little bit of a friendly competition amongst the group, but also people oftentimes had found themselves taking photos of things or having a conversation with a local, whether it was with hand gestures because they didn't speak, Italian or French or Spanish. But then they felt they wanted to give something back, but they didn't have anything. So we now give out hats that are little cycling caps with, they say Colorado, USA, and ExperiencePlus because everybody likes something with a USA on it. And we now see them dotted across all of our rides throughout Europe with little kids who might have hadn't gotten one, or the market, lady who sells peaches who got one because she gave one of our cyclists a peach and somebody wanted to give them a hat back. So it's a great. So we really think that an important part of a guided tour is to enable that cultural interaction. On that same note, somebody asked about guide qualifications. And I think that's an important thing to look at if you're looking at guided tours, is to understand what are the guide qualifications, especially in terms of safety as well. That's an important piece of why one takes a guided tour if you're just starting to travel by bikes, because there are safety concerns, of course, that even though an experienced cyclist maybe has heard many times, it's always good to remind them to only do one thing at a time on a bike. And then also our guide training in terms of enabling those cultural interactions, I think, are really important, and just making sure that everybody's experience is top. Does anybody else have anything else to add on the question about guides? And
yeah, I can jump in on the cultural interaction and the guides. Again, we have the fitness level, the ability level for the tour, but we also look at the cultural interaction level. We try to take that into account when we are creating the tour. So, for instance, if there was less biking, it was a bit easier on the biking side. We would generally have a bit more of a cultural interaction. Not to fill out the day, but to give you something else, off the bike to do. As you won't be spending 4, 5, 6 hours on the bike, you have something else to do in the afternoon, or another activity, whether it be some canoeing one afternoon or something like that, just to give you that deeper cultural interaction ultimately with the area that you're passing through. And guide qualifications differ all over the world. In Scotland, a mountain bike guide has to be qualified, and we have the Mountain Bike Leader Award here, and we try to get all our guides around the world to adhere to and train to that level, which is not easy. It takes time, but as long as they have an understanding of how we work and what we are qualified to in this country, we try to feed that out around the world to our guides. And we also have a guide exchange scheme where the guides from around the world will all ride with each other in their own destinations, so that the quality level of guiding and experience levels are as closely matched in every destination around the world. And the English-speaking question as well, all tours that are run with us are taken in English. So there is no problem of translating.
But Ewan, is it Scottish English, or is it, because that can require some interpretation, right?
You tell me. Have you understood what I'm saying? Am I talking to myself?
I just wanted to add one more thing, is that the bike tour community is a truly global community. People are so enthusiastic about this, and they want to share their experience and their knowledge. And if you go, so for example, we have a couple Facebook pages that have about 70,000 fans now, and they are very interactive. People will ask questions, and they'll get a lot of responses on everything from equipment to tour destinations. We have, if you don't like social media like Facebook, and you want to use our electronic forums, you can do that too. We have staff and volunteers who regularly monitor those, and those are all divided up again by these basic questions on fitness levels, equipment, tour destinations, not just in North America, but globally. So all that's through our website, and you can find all these connections with people because they will share. And then we have a regular blog. We post 6 to 8 fresh blog posts a week. And one of the best ones is by a fellow in Seattle named Willie Weir, who has traveled everywhere around the world by bicycle. He's really well known, and he is the ultra enthusiast. He is all about bike travel for the experience and the cultural interaction. And he has traveled in dozens of countries, and his stories of how he interacts with people are truly amazing. And the blog posts are wonderful because he embeds a lot of his photography, and also he's a host for a public radio station in Seattle, and so sometimes he'll talk about those stories too, and he'll share his MP3 files through the blog. So check that out. It's all free and available to anybody.
Thanks, Jim. We had one last question, which is a good question because we've been discussing a lot about ability and making sure people understand kind of levels of trips, which was, what if you're traveling with a group of friends but everybody rides at various levels? Are there opportunities and ways that you can travel together? And I would say certainly the trip design is key to this. Sometimes different, whether it's a guided bike tour itinerary or something you do on your own, but I'd say, like in our examples, we sometimes have loop rides, so if you don't have to do the full ride, or you can take a day off. And then oftentimes our trips that are rated less hard, we can always add more miles. We can always add more rides after somebody arrives at the destination for that day. Sometimes even the tour leaders want to go out and do an afternoon ride if they've been driving in the van all day. So every company has a way to address that. We tend to have one set ride during the day, but then there's options to shorten it because there's always van support on our trips. So if somebody who doesn't want to ride as far, they can definitely jump in the van. Or if somebody wants to add miles, there's a lot of trips where that's possible on almost every single day. Or maybe the trip is designed to spend multiple nights in certain places, so somebody can just ride every other day because they don't need to do the loop ride and instead would prefer to sit by the pool or go visit some museums in whatever fabulous little place they are. Or they can go and ride in the van and still do the same day's ride or see the same day's ride, but decide to take the time off the bike. So there's lots of ways that people have solved that problem as well, and I think the whole key for us is that getting somebody out, just the first step, is something that then stays with somebody so that they will continue to maintain bicycling as part of their life and probably do more of it, which is good for us. And I think that's why there's such an increase in bicycling. And as Jim said, this community is very enthusiastic and growing every day. So I think we've finished up our questions, and I don't know if anybody has anything else they would like to say in closing or as a wrap-up. Like I said originally, we will be posting this online, and we'll be sending this link out to anybody interested in learning more about what we talked about today. Jim, Ewan, any final thoughts?
I would just come in on the last question and just say, agree with you to say that, within the mountain biking world, it works the same for us. If you've got a group of mixed abilities, that's where the guide comes in and the trip planning comes in to make sure everybody is getting what they want out of their adventure. So yeah, just ask the questions. Us as operators are there to get your questions and to fit you into what tour would suit you, your friends, your family, your group. So ask away, and I'm sure, I'm speaking for everybody here, but I'm sure everyone would be glad to help with that.
All I can say is it never ceases to amaze me how people adapt to bike travel once they get out there. And I saw this on my recent trip to Australia, and we did this mountain bike trip, and it was a small group, just 2 guides and 4 of us, but the 3 other people were from Australia, Britain, and Germany, and none had ever mountain biked in their lives, but they'd all ridden a bike, they all commuted around by bike, and it was fantastic to see the huge smiles on their faces, that feeling of freedom. It didn't mean they were going to abandon riding a bike on a street, but they couldn't believe how wonderful it was, like Ewan was saying, to be out there biking with kangaroos and emus and just seeing the wildlife and not having to worry about cars. It was a fantastic experience. And again, just seeing it through their eyes was just a reminder of to me of the power of bike travel.
So true, so true. I try and get out on tour at least once a year just to remind myself. I've probably traveled with thousands of people across Europe, and every time I go on tour, I just get reinvigorated as to why we do what we do. So I completely agree, Jim. Thank you for that comment. So I think one last note, just we will post our contact information and company names on the recording so that you all know who was involved today. And I think that this wraps up our first hangout between Ewan, who is with H&I. I'll do a little summary right now. Ewan, who is with H&I Adventures, and Jim, who is with Adventure Cycling, and Maria Elena, who is with ExperiencePlus. And you can connect with all of us on our websites, and we'll post those on the Hangout page as soon as we sign off here so that you can find us easily. And we obviously all have various social media platforms that you can find us as they never end to pop up. Hopefully they will stop doing that. But thank you all for attending, and please reach out to us if you have any other questions. Thanks.